I mean, I think just in a general sense, the digital and the not digital are combining in like almost infinite ways every day in our lives. And it almost has begun to feel totally invisible because it's happening all the time. And the same is true in a research setting. And in any kind of development setting as well. So it's happening all the time. When we think about climate change and the impact in particular that climate change is having on farmers, farmers generally are not feeling the slow incremental over decades impact of marginal increases in temperature, which is the general trend of climate change. What they're feeling is the impact of the increase in variability from one year and one season to the next. And that variability is increasing. And as that sort of trajectory goes up, the extremes are getting more extreme. So when you have a particularly hot year, it's more hot than the last particularly hot year. But the same could be true of cold years, frosts, and things like that. So when we work with varieties at World Coffee Research, which is an interesting and particularly scalable technology, agronomic approaches are very unique to the climate that you're in. Varieties are something that you can generally deploy more at a regional landscape or even kind of country, and in some cases global level. So they're a very scalable technology. But it's still true that they don't perform exactly the same in all places. So varieties that do well in variable climates versus just really, really well in one particular climate are, of course, of a lot of interest right now, thinking about climate change and adaptation for farmers. So how do you figure out which varieties do well in one climate, in one place, versus in a lot of places? You use a really traditional research approach, which is called multi-location trials. You take a bunch of varieties and you plant them in a lot of places and you evaluate them over time. That's a really traditional approach. It's agricultural researchers have been using it for 100 years. But that's obviously very time consuming and very expensive, especially when you're doing it in coffee, which grows in so many countries. It's one thing to have 10,000 corn trials in one state, which is like what they do in Iowa. It's another thing to have, a couple hundred trials in many countries. So using really simple digital tools and introducing them into that very traditional context makes the research even possible. So as an example, we use mobile apps so that the research partners that we have, which are often researchers at national coffee institutions, can have a structured format for collecting all the data that we need to collect about how those plants are performing in all these different locations, make sure that the data is really clean and it comes to us immediately, right? Using satellite technology and the internet. So it's really basic, and even the digital tools in some cases that we're using are really basic, but they make aggregating data and information and then analyzing it possible in a way that just wouldn't have been even a couple of years ago. So the other place where we see a lot of really interesting new capacity in research is around data analysis, both advances in computing power and statistical software. They just let us deal with a lot more data and a lot more complicated data than we ever could have if we were still doing our analysis on index cards, which is like what researchers used to do in the 40s. So I think I love this idea of, I want to talk about statistics for 1 second, because it is actually a really important way that we can take local information and scale that information into broader knowledge. Using statistics, so let me just give this example, talking about variety performance. If you can only put those varieties in some places, you can't put them everywhere because it would be cost prohibitive and insane. But you want to understand if those findings are relevant for more than just that one particular location where they're growing. If you use good experimental design, and there's lots of standards for this, and you use appropriate statistical analysis, you can generalize the knowledge that you have from these few trials out to the many. So you can say, oh, because we designed in this certain way, we can see that these varieties we think are with a high degree of confidence good, not just in this one location, but in hot, dry areas in general, et cetera. So you can see how that is really relevant and powerful. Good statistical design is basically a tool for scaling or generalizing knowledge, which matters because you can't possibly study everything everywhere. And a really fascinating application of this in the coffee sustainability space is the verification model that Enveritas uses. Traditional sustainability certification models are limited not all farmers can access them because they're maybe marginalized smallholders who they just don't have access to that. And so using a really straightforward statistical sampling approach, what Enveritas does is they basically go out and randomly survey farmers in a very, very broad area. And because of their really tight statistical design and rigorous approach, they can generalize the findings and are able to cover in their verification model marginalized smallholders that just would otherwise, we would not be able to understand what's happening with those farms in the sustainability dimension. So neither the work that we're doing in that space or like the concept that this really clever concept that Enveritas has would have been actually impossible 50 years ago. We could have done it. It just would have been so prohibitively expensive to do because it would have been everyone doing everything manually that it would have been insane to even try to do it. So I think it's one really awesome way that the power of digital tools allows us to do things that we couldn't really feasibly have done before now.